Hi everyone, it's Janet and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be working with two art impression sets. The first is this cute little matchbook set. It's a sewing room with all these tiny little pieces. I'm going to be using the sewing machine on the table and the bookcase for this card. I'm also going to be using the flag double stitched die set, and I'm going to choose this one for my sentiment. I've got my marker paper set up in the MISTI, and I'm going to stamp these two images from the matchbook set. I'm using Memento ink for this. It's very friendly for Copic and it doesn't smear, so that's kind of a standard, I guess, for us Copic colorists is to use the Memento, although there's lots of other inks out there as well. But I'm going to take my chamois and remove the ink from the tab that juts out on the right side of the sewing machine and the table. That is needed when you actually use these stamps in the matchbook, but since I'm using these as standalone, I do not need that tab and I don't want it to stamp. You could also cover that up with a little piece of paper when you ink it. That'd work too. I'm going to start by coloring in the sewing machine using my favorite white combo, which is B60, BV31, and BV23. White always has some kind of shading or coloring in it, and this is one of my favorites, as I mentioned, for that look because it has a little bit of blue in it. This combo works really well for snow, probably because it has just a tiny tish of blue tone to it. But again, not that much different from cool grays, but just a little bit more blue in it, and it just is my preference. So we all have things that we like more than other things, and like I say, this is my favorite of the white combos that I use. Now I'm going to be working on the table that the sewing machine is sitting on, and this is a brown combo of three colors, E50, E53, and E57. So I start with my darker colors first, but you can do your light colors first. It really doesn't matter all that much. It's kind of, I think, what you're used to and what you're most comfortable with. But I start with my darkest E57 around the handles, around the edges of the cabinet doors, and then I blend out with E53 and then use the lightest E50. I will often have to redo the colors in a combo like this because they tend to saturate out. E50 is really light colored. It's kind of a very light beige, whereas E57 is very dark brown. So when you use these two initially together, the lightest color tends to saturate out the darkest color. But that's easy to fix by just adding another layer of color, and even though the spread between E50 and E57 is quite large, I do like the ability to get both dark and lights together in one image like this. So anyway, that's my explanation for picking that combo. Now for the shelf, I'm doing the same thing, E57, E53, and E50. Now I think I called this a bookshelf when I introduced this set, but it's not a bookshelf, it's actually a shelf with spools of thread on it. So I'm going to color those as spools in a minute. The handles on the cabinet, I brought in C7, which is a very dark, cool gray, and I also on the spools on that shelf, the top and bottom of the spools, I put in a very thin line of that C7. The material I'm doing in an orange. This is YR02 and YR04, and I'm leaving just a little bit of white there in the center. For the first spool, I'm using YR2 to coat the entire spool. Then I'm blending in just a little bit of YR09, and then I'm using a black Micron 01 pen to put in a few lines so that it gives the impression of thread. The next one is going to be blue. This combo is B00 and B06. Same thing, B00 is light, put in a little bit of shading with B06 and then follow up with my black pen. For the last spool, I'm using G21 and G94. And again, I'll follow up with the black pen just to put a few lines through there. I'm sorry you can't see that detail really clearly in this video, but if you take a look at the picture, you will see that detail very clearly in there. I've now used Y35 for the measuring tape, and that finishes this image up. I'm ready to die cut it out. Now this set comes with the matching dies for it, and I have cut a die out of just some scrap paper here, And I'm going to put it around the image so that I've got a nice even border around it, and then I'm going to bring in the die for this. Now you'll see on the far left side of both the die cut and the actual die that there's that tab on the left side. I don't have cardstock that even is present for this to cut out the tab, but it is going to cut a little bit of the tab out because of the size of the cardstock I colored on, but I'm going to trim that away. In the meantime, I'm going to set up the shelf the same way as I did the sewing machine and the cabinet. And when you slip that die in, you're going to feel it like just slip into that hole. It's a definite feeling that you will know when you experience it. Then I'm going to run this through my little Bira sunlit machine. This is a nice little machine to have on your desk for little dies. This is a 3-inch throat, works really great. I think I'll put a link to my review of that in the upper right hand corner so you can check it out if you're at all interested in a little handy desktop unit. I use mine a fair bit actually, it's just very handy. So I'm going to use my scissors to trim away any of the little bit of tab that was left there. While that happens, I want to tell you that I'm going to create a drapery piece out of cardstock for this card. And the drapery was chosen specifically to be used with the sewing theme. I have a friend who does a lot of sewing and she does like to make drapes, so I thought it would be fun to mimic that drape in a card for her who is a sewing enthusiast. So the piece that I need to make this drapery piece is 3.5 by 10 3/4. And I've marked 3/4 of an inch from each side, only on opposite sides. So 3/4 of an inch from the top and 3/4 of an inch from the bottom on the opposite side. Then I'm going to put it in my cutter and I'm going to match up the marks, the 3/4 inch on each side, so that I end up cutting diagonally through this piece. And this means you have actually 2 pieces to make draperies with. I'm only going to make one with 1 piece, but you can make 2 out of every piece that you cut like this. Now I'm going to go ahead and score it. So I'm going to start with 1 inch, then 1 3/4 inch, then 3 1/4 inch, 4 inches, 5 1/2 inches, 6 1/4 inches, 7 3/4 inches, 8 1/2 inches, and finally 10 inches. So now we can start folding this. This is basically a concertina fold. Start with a mountain fold and then fold over the next 2 lines as a valley and a mountain and continue all the way across. When you're finished, this piece folded is going to be exactly 4 inches wide. Now you see me struggling just a little bit with that fold because when I did the scoring there I was 1/8 of an inch off, and then I fixed it, rescored it, and so now of course when it came to fold it I had to fight with that just a tiny bit because they're so close together, those score lines. But you don't see it because of the pleating of this, so it's not a total fail like sometimes it would be if you saw every score line in your piece. So anyway, just pointing that out. So now I've got it all together and you can see the back as well as the front. And to hold this together you need to glue it. So what I'm going to do is glue the back side first, but you could start with the front side first. It doesn't really matter. But you do need to glue both sides because they both have kind of accordion edges on the front and the back. So if you want them all to be secure, you need to glue both on the front and back. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit so you can see that. And now you see on the front I've got to do the same thing. And voila, there is that drapery piece. I'm going to erase that 3/4 inch mark that still shows there. And it's ready now to go in my card. I love how that drapery look appears because of the light color on the back side of this paper. So you'll want to use 2-sided paper unless you want to have white showing, which is fine. Just be aware of that. This is the other piece and that's how it would look if I wanted the same effect. But again, I'm not going to use that today, but I will make myself a card with that. So here's the rest of the card. I've got a 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 and a 4 by 5 1/4 piece. to stack on top of each other. This is going to make a mat, very thin mat of dark green around the lighter green. I'll just get that in place. This is where the wet glue comes in handy a lot, because if I used double-sided adhesive, I'd get basically one try at it, maybe two. But when the mats are so close together, you really do need to be pretty precise, or you will cover up one side so much that it becomes extremely obvious that it's not even. So the wet glue allows you to move it around, take it off, put it back on. It's great. So that orange cardstock is an A2 top fold card, and I'm going to install this double piece of cardstock on top of it. So now I've got three colors, again matted very closely together, but it's still effective to have all those colors in it. I am trying to play off of the colors of the pattern paper here, and this is the first piece, 2.5 by 4 inches. This has some sewing looking stitching on the pattern on that side, so I thought that would be fun to add here. All the patterned cardstock I'm using today comes from Cosmo Cricut, and it was part of a single pack. And all of the plain cardstock I'm using comes from cut cardstock. This next piece is 2.5 by 4 inches, and I'll put it at the top. Due to its age, I doubt Cosmo Cricut has this available, but it was a great pack full of outdoor and camping images. It had stickers, stamps, and all kinds of goodies. I've used it quite a bit. I don't think I've used it for camping though, but I've used it for a few other things. So anyway, you can see where I'm going to be putting the drapery piece on. And by the way, this drapery pattern I think has been around a long time, but it's getting a revival through Stampin' Up! Demonstrators. I read the blog posts of about 5 different Stampin' Up! Folks who had done different versions of this, and then I created my own pattern with basically my own measurements. This dark orange piece is 1 3/4 by 4 1/4, and on top of this I'm going to put another piece of pattern paper, 1.5 by 4 1/4. And these two pieces together are going to form the sentiment strip. It's going to go across the top of my card. It's going to cover the raw edges of the drapery piece and the upper part of my card and make everything look nice and finished. Now when I did put this together, I noticed as I placed it across the top of my card base that it was just a hair bit too long. So this is how I fixed it. I just took my ruler. Now this has got a little steel bar on the side. It's the Tim Holtz ruler. And I used my craft knife and cut just a hair off. And that was perfect. It was just a tiny bit off. Sometimes that happens. When you use your trimmer, inevitably, if you just move it slightly, you're going to get a little bit off. And I guess that's what I did here. I'm going to continue working on the sentiment by bringing out the double-ended flag that I cut out using the flag double-stitched die set from Art Impressions. And I'm going to bring back the stamp set and pull out the sentiment included, which says, "To someone so S-E-W nice." Anybody who is familiar with Art Impressions knows that puns and cute little sentiments like this are kind of the staple for their line, and this one of course does not disappoint. Once again, I'm going to use the Memento Tuxedo black ink to stamp this sentiment, and I'm just going to use my acrylic block. I got a little bit of excess ink on there, so I wiped it off with my fingers, and I'm going to stamp this right at the bottom of the flag and to the right. Now because this is such a good quality stamp, it stamps first try, great impression. Again, that's a plus of using good quality products, is you can get away with that. You don't need to bring out the MISTI. Alright, so I'm going to put this in place just slightly to the left side. Then I'm going to bring in the sewing machine and cabinet. I've got it on double-sided foam tape, so it's going to stand up and above the rest of the card pieces. It is so cute. I love how it turned out. And I've got double-sided foam tape on the shelf as well, and I'm going to sit it so that it appears to be like sitting on top of the flag. And then finally, I'm adding some orange pearls from Eyelet Outlet. It just happened to match excellently. So I think it all turned out great, and I'm really, really pleased with this card for my sewing friend. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope I provided some inspiration to you. If you enjoyed it, please give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And in the meantime, here are a few other videos that I think you might like if you liked this one. Well, I'll be back soon with another video. See you then. Bye.